Hey there, everyone. My name is Sarah DeHaven, and this is my EA Zoom meeting, The Moon's Nodes and Pluto, Healing to Empower the Collective Soul. All right. So here's a quick introduction for me. I'd like to start off by saying I'm going to be using evolutionary astrology techniques in this presentation, but I am not certified by Jeffrey Wolf Green or any evolutionary astrology body. I am a trained astrologer in traditional astrology, but as far as evolutionary astrology goes, I'm mostly self-taught. And yeah, so I'll just read my introduction because I always forget what I'm going to say when I introduce myself, so I literally wrote it down. Yeah, I'm Sarah DeHaven, and I'm so many things. It's really hard to label myself. And even in this talk, my intent is to reveal just how confining such concepts can be in a more esoteric way and exoteric way is my intent. So for the sake of and in appreciation for clarity, just to let you know who I am an astrologer, like I said. I also work as a personal and spiritual advisor. I'm a student of the occult. I love occulted knowledge. I want to know all the secrets. And I feel that occulted knowledge exists around all of us. We could call it dark matter. Perhaps there's a correlation there. So the focus of my work with astrology and spiritual advising, personal advising, is to help serve as an information bridge for those who seek to know themselves. Super passionate about that. It's my understanding that in order to know the nature of this realm that we live in corporeally, here in the material realm, the 3D realm, as well as getting to understand the nature of our function, purpose, and role here on earth, we must know who we are. We must know thyself. We can liken the knowledge of oneself to the law of correspondence, as within, so without, as above, so below. As we are inside, and the more that we come to understand from within, to know it through observation and experiential wisdom, time put in self-inquiry and self-observation. In so doing, we begin to deepen our ability to perceive the reality around us with rationality, with the discernment of a sage. And so that is my endeavor as a person, but also my endeavor as far as my service to others through astrology, etc. All right, so the presentation to outline. This is what we're going to be talking about, what we'll be covering. So using some evolutionary astrology techniques, like I was saying, we're going to examine the reality of the situation that we're in as a collective, impacted and influenced by the powerful and influential nation, the United States of America. We're going to be looking at some natural laws like cause and effect. How did we get to this point where we're at today? What do we do now that we're here? Where do we go from here? How can we use Pluto in astrology and the nodes of the moon? And I also touch on the nodes of Pluto too. How do we use this information to willfully evolve toward healing on in our immediate life, right? And in our generationally karmic ties, right? How do we heal that if it's already transpired? Interestingly enough, it's theorized that all things are happening concurrently. So if we're healing the now, it stands to reason that we can heal the future and heal the past. Yeah, it's a little paradoxical, a little esoteric, but it does make sense the more you contemplate this concept that we could heal everything in the now. Yeah, and so yeah, I put a little spoiler here that figuring out where we go from here will involve acknowledgement of the issues that Pluto, the soul, right? What Pluto will bring to the surface one way or another, acknowledging that, right? Instead of trying to repress it, we want to evolve. And especially when we've got Uranus shaking things up as well, like recently and in recent years as well, like for instance, the Uranus-Pluto square around, I think it was like 2012 to about 2015-ish, right? Things have just been very, I guess you could say, change. It's very clear change is happening, shifting is happening, right? So we're also going to look at mentalism and correspondence. These are natural laws or principles. And we're going to see how we can use them to our advantage so that we're learning, growing, rejuvenating, and recalibrating. Yeah, recalibrating our vibration more quickly and efficiently. We will look at ways that complement the energies at play as reflected through Pluto, Pluto's own nodes, and the nodes of the moon. All right, so yeah, a dawn of a new era, the signing of the Declaration of Independence. This was 1776, right? The nation known as the United States of America is born. Born into what kind of world is a good question to ask. What kind of karma was the nation born into, right? What was the quality of consciousness, we could say, of those who'd taken on the role of father and mother, i.e. Capricorn and Cancer, respectively, yeah? So the chart I'm using for this is the chart rectified by Ebenezer Sibley. So that's the Sagittarius Ascendant USA chart. There's a lot of controversy as far as the actual time of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, which is where the date and time of this natal chart is derived. But this seems to be the most popular one. I'll get into a little bit more as to why, well, I mean, I don't plan on necessarily focusing on the moon. I'll explain why in a bit, just for this particular chart. But yeah, so anyways, this is the USA natal chart. And you'll notice that we've got Pluto retrograde. It's in Capricorn, cardinal Earth, right? So forward-moving Earth, initiating Earth, and third octave. Third octave, not everyone may be aware of what that means. If we're to split up the 12 zodiac signs into 3 octaves, the third octave implies an awareness of the bigger picture. So that encompasses Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. Yeah? In this, we noticed too that Pluto is in a new phase to its own south node, right? You'll notice it's on the chart here in red at 17 degrees Capricorn. It's in a new phase to its own south node, which correlates to moving forward from the past, right? Initiating a new identity, perhaps a new cycle. The past is Capricornic, right? It has Capricornic soul desires, which correlates to and is confirmed by the narrative that we're aware of as far as the origins of the United States are concerned. That is escape from a tyrannical British monarchy, right? To establish their own structure. And then the south node of the moon is balsamic to Capricorn Pluto retrograde, reaching the end of the cycle to begin anew. Yeah. So then I wonder to myself, will the people have learned not to repeat the missteps of those that ruled before them? Remember, we were asking, what is this? What is the nation being born into? What is the karma of this nation? Yeah. So a balsamic moon south node to an inwardly turned Pluto could suggest such an important question may have been pondered at length by those among those who founded the nation. Balsamic phases may imply ambiguity, difficulty grasping clarity, being that it's in like the Pisces portion of a cycle, right? All right, so yeah, Pluto's nodes. We can consider the south node and north node to better understand the soul's memory and the growth path of the soul, right? South node in the natal chart for the United States is in Capricorn, so this can imply like a memory of control, tyranny, these kinds of things, cold-heartedness. The north node of Cancer, or the north node of Pluto is in Cancer, so this could imply growing toward home and family, nurturing, caring, right? Homeland, nations, family, I think I mentioned. And what are the implications of beginning a country intent on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? What are the implications of that when clearly beginning their karma, this nation, from a place or a level of consciousness that was seemingly unaware of the effects that they were planting? That building a country atop the genocide and enslavement of others is out of step with common sense in the eyes of natural law. Many indigenous cultures of the land claimed by the United States already knew these natural truths, but they didn't have much of a say in the matter. They weren't signing the Declaration of Independence, ironically. And so, yes, we can see through examination of Pluto, its nodes, and the nodes of the moon, that the soul's journey of this collective has only just begun, and yet it's being born into a consciousness that has been twisted by a toxic patriarchal control system. So the break from the British was not as clean as the founders may have hoped for, yeah? All right, so yeah, moving on. We're still examining the same chart here, right? And so I thought this was really interesting. When I noticed the ruler of Pluto and the south node of Pluto, Saturn in Libra, it's actually in a waning bisextile to Pluto, which I thought was kind of cool. So, just very surface level, what this could be indicating regarding soul growth and the demands of reality. I asked this question, yeah? So septiles, from what I understand, intend to keep us on track. Some people call these like destiny points, right? If we were playing a video game, we would call septiles invisible walls. You see all this area around you want to explore, and if we go too far off track, somehow we're kind of snapped back onto our karmic path, right? By destiny, fortune, or specific individuals, events, cataclysms, all sorts of things, right? Individuating is important with a waning bisextile from my studies, seem to confirm that. So yeah, to do so in a way that is developing awareness that there needs to be room for everyone to take up space, yeah? For all to have the right to seek enlightenment, so to speak, which was very much what the Declaration of Independence implied that their desire was, right? And so we have Saturn, Libra, fairness, balance between self and other, reasonable expectations, diplomacy, and objective reasoning. And then we have Pluto, Capricorn retrograde, soul-level desire to build and reinforce structures for oneself or for the nation, right? Since this is a chart for the nation, or the cognition, or we could even say like the oversoul of the nation, right? The consciousness. So yeah, soul-level desire to build and reinforce structures for oneself, desire for clout, a need to build mastery from within, authority from within. This seems to be the sole desire of the nation, yeah? And so slow-moving planets means slow-moving cycles and lessons. So like a moon moves around the Earth, 20.5 days approximately. Those are quicker cycles, quicker periods to learn and grow and plant seeds. With Pluto and Saturn, that's a way slower cycle. Like these are slower-moving cycles, yeah? Especially Pluto, I think it's like 248 years is the orbit, something like that. So, yeah, slow-moving planets can mean slow-moving cyclic lessons. Projecting our expectations onto others to conform to our rule of law without first being a master from within may teach over time, over a long period of time, to see that a free and spacious structure, Capricorn, right, gives us room to grow without confinement. Saturn in Libra wants us to give room for everyone, fairness, balance, and equality. All right. And yeah, so the north node of Pluto is ruled by the moon in Aquarius. As we can see here, though, it's kind of ambiguous because, like I was saying, the time, we don't know if 5:10 p.m. is the exact time. This could actually be a Pisces moon that we're looking at for the U.S. natal chart, which is very interesting to contemplate, especially when we consider, for instance, the north node being in Leo and the sun being in Cancer. I mean, we could go so deep into this, but from what my examinations of the chart show, there are many echoes to imply that the sun or that this natal chart could have either or. It could even be a cusp moon. We don't really know. So instead, what I've decided to do was look at the moon's nodes, to look at the moon's intentions, knowing full well that we don't actually know the exact flavor of the ego mind of the nation because of the birth time being a bit ambiguous. The ego mind being the moon, right? At least from an evolutionary astrology perspective. So let's look at the nodes in that case, right? So yeah, the moon's nodes, south node Aquarius, correlates with memories and an awareness, memories and or awareness, and a familiarity with trauma, alienation, being maybe the mad one, a bit of the strange one, projection, revolutionaries, secret societies, yeah. Very interesting. The founding fathers were all Masons. Well, at least a good chunk of them. So throwing that one out there. And, the British regime too. I mean, we could so dive deep into this. But the monarchy and those involved in the monarchy, it is implied, now you'd want to do your own research, but many of those might have been involved in secret societies too. So interesting that the south node is in Aquarius, that memory of exclusion, elitism, secret societies, these kinds of things, perhaps. Then there's the north node. So that's like the direction of growth, right? The imperative for growth of the ego of the nation, we could say, and how it's playing out. And man, a north node in Leo just makes sense for America. I mean, we've got Hollywood, we've got America just having such an influential change or impact on the entire world. living by example, you know, really, really inspiring people as well in its own way, this nation. I just want to say, like, I don't want to be completely negative, but, you know, there's good things and bad things to a North Node in Leo, and being inspiring to others to shine and be themselves is one example of that. So yeah, North Node in Leo, an imperative pulling toward the spotlight for recognition, dignity, warmth, leadership, rulership, self-esteem, inflation, getting bigger and bigger and bigger, army bases everywhere. That would be more Capricorn, right? Capricorn and Leo. Of course, it's a whole gestalt, right? So if we look at the whole picture, it's an interesting little connection there. Self-esteem, North Node in Leo. Again, yeah, inflation, self-importance, narcissism, creative self-actualization. And so I say these keywords, I just want to be clear, I say these keywords with the knowledge that we're looking at this objectively, so please derive your own conclusions and continue listening. All right, next we have more on the moon's nodes. So again, the South Node is in Aquarius, and it's ruled by Saturn in Libra traditionally, right? Aquarius is traditionally ruled by Saturn, so it's co-ruled by Saturn in Libra and Uranus in Gemini. Uranus and Saturn are also trining each other. It's a bit of a loose trine, but I would count it. And this could imply that the ideals focused on emancipation from tyranny and structuring a fair and balanced society are flowing with ease at the inception of this nation. So gifts from the collective memory imprint of this nation seen via the South Node, yeah, that implies that there's an inherent knowledge or sagacity, you know, of how to build structures such as governments. And then the North Node is ruled by the Sun in Cancer. So there's an impulsion to grow into more loving, caring caretakers and caregivers, leading by example again. And the knight in shining armor kind of a thing with America, yeah. I almost want to start singing the Team America song from Team America World Police, but I won't. I will save you that. And also too, nostalgia mixed with a sense of innate divinity and all the rights that kind of a status implies, yeah. Growing toward being the knight in shining armor, having confidence, you know, embodying our own royal divinity. Much of that can be seen even just by the way that America iterates itself, right? Our knowledge of America really shows that it's about the child finding itself in a sense, you know, that hero's journey, we could call it. And so, yeah, in this chart, we're placing emphasis on Cancer, Leo, Aquarius, and Capricorn. So that would be the Sun, Moon, Saturn, and Uranus, when we're taking into consideration the collective soul of the United States and its evolutionary path, right? Like that's the focus we're taking with the chart. So such energies, Cancer, Leo, Aquarius, and Capricorn, may be asking, how does a benevolent, ever-growing humanitarian, healthy and strong nation and the people therein govern itself and its people best, right? And now we flash forward to the present day. We're presently nearing the end of a very significant cycle. Yeah, we're coming to Pluto's return. Oh man. Oh man, it's a pretty intense one, and tons of astrologers are. Everyone's got their you know, their forecast or their assumption or idea of how this could play out. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's a quote from the Declaration of Independence. And I wonder, so far down the line from 1776, how is our child developing so far? If we were to look at the nation as our own child, like how's that development working out? How is the soul of the nation developing in relation to its original intention and desire? You may already be able to figure that out for yourself. Here are some pictures that I have that I wanted to share just to show kind of where things are going. We got Occupy Wall Street, you know, the too big to fail banks and the bailouts, and the very clear message that was brought through that with the disparity in income, right? So that was a big one. And we have, of course, here too, I would really want to highlight this. The Dakota Access Pipeline. Yeah. The pipeline going through indigenous land, and the water protectors, the indigenous people who are tirelessly protecting, doing all they can, protecting the water. Even here in Canada, slight aside here, like we've got people trying to keep ATCO gas, Alta gas, out of our rivers. They want to frack here. And we have the local indigenous community here. They are here 24/7 in that area protecting the water. So in the States too, the indigenous culture, although genocided to a very small percentage of the population, they still fight tirelessly for the earth, because their memory, right? I couldn't look at the inception of the land, Turtle Island, otherwise known as North America. I can't look at the inception of every indigenous culture, but it may be a good guess to say that they are well in tune with the rhythm of the earth and thus natural law, and in enough ways to at least put common sense together to say that water needs to be protected. So we have this happening in the nation now. Selfie culture, another one too. And man, Pluto goes into Aquarius, it'll be an interesting one to see where that goes. But, we have this kind of disconnect from each other. A Cancer Sun nation like the United States, it's interesting to see how disconnected we're becoming, even out of body, which is an interesting one. And again, more pictures of water protectors. We have over on the left here a picture of a stork who is swimming around or a pelican, my bad, swimming around in the Gulf of Mexico after BP oil decided to, well, they didn't decide to, but what did they call it? I don't remember exactly, but I think it was 2010 when the BP oil spill caused massive damage, and there's been mass extinctions on the Gulf Coast as a result. Black Lives Matter movement is another one too. A nation founded on enslavement, but at the same time with a desire for liberty for all. We're still not quite there yet, where we've learned that liberty for all means that everyone needs to be treated equally, and that everyone doesn't necessarily need or should be forced to live in a toxic patriarchal paradigm. Perhaps. This is my opinion leaking out, we can tell. The Me Too movement is another one too, showing it's a harbinger of things to come. The corruption in America's Hollywood. North Node in Leo, it's an interesting one. Hollywood and the North Node in Leo, they correlate very closely, but the Me Too movement shows the sexual corruption, the disparity between genders in Hollywood, and we may see in the future more and more evidence to support that this is also leaking into, or also happening in the government, right? Many people are aware of it, but the consensus hasn't realized it yet. And then, of course, finally, because I needed to leave the best for last, we have Donald Trump in office. I mean, I just have to ask myself, did the founding fathers see this coming? All right, so this is just a little snapshot into where we're at today, these days. The result of seeds sown by hands unaware. We can always have the best intentions, but if we're ignorant, sometimes we don't grow as intended. But yet, cycles are so long that perhaps with this Pluto return, we may be beginning a new cycle to give us a chance to begin from a place of more conscious awareness of what it is that we're creating as individuals and in a nation, in our nation, right? All right, so let's move on. Well, this is another interesting picture too, just the migrant caravan recently. That was, there's a caravan of migrants trying to get into the United States, and I found this picture very interesting, these hardened, fortified borders to the exclusion of those in pursuit of American ideals. Could this be a distorted Capricorn Pluto that we're seeing, right? Just a little something to consider. So here we are in the present day. This is literally just today, December 13th, 2018, and the transits that we're seeing in the sky, with keeping in a focus on the Pluto and the nodes, Pluto's nodes, the moon's nodes, right, and Pluto itself, and the rulers of those. We'll notice here that we can kind of see, if we look at this chart, we can actually see like a picture-perfect portrait that is completely sensical as far as why the nation's where it's at today, right? We can totally see that. And natural laws like cause and effect and rhythm and vibration, which I didn't mention in the slide here, they can clearly explain too, like, why things are the way they are. Yeah. So being at the precipice of the end of a cycle, and it appears that many of us in the collective are feeling it and experiencing it. Just ask anyone how they've been doing these days. It's the gravity is a thing, you know? Yeah, we're experiencing it in the 3D world. So people may be experiencing more difficulties with money, financially, more and more difficulties with having the freedom and space to kind of be who they are, you know? We're seeing a lot of issues with racism and otherism, which I'll get into a little bit in a minute here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, you'll notice in the chart here, I've highlighted some points. I just wanted to highlight how much Capricorn energy is in the chart versus if we were to look at the other end, like if we look at the south node of Pluto at 27 degrees of Capricorn, right, which is around, actually incidentally, I didn't even notice this, but it's right, give or take about 20 degrees where the natal Pluto is for the 1776 chart. Interesting that we're talking about this today. But yeah, you'll notice the gravity of all the Capricorn versus the north node of the moon and the north node of Pluto. For us to grow, like this could be implying that we have a, you know, we may need to be determined to grow, else we may be pulled back into older paradigms. But then again, a north node and a south node, like the north node doesn't automatically imply that we're growing in a positive direction. The south node doesn't automatically imply that the past is a bad thing. If we're conscious individuals with an awareness of like natural laws and principles, cosmic law, and an awareness of our intention as an individual, where we want to grow, what we want to grow into, the south node can provide us with so much wisdom that it can help us iterate our north node growth in ways that are more healthy and more aligned with who it is we really are on the core level. And this, of course, speaks for the nation too. The more of the nation who come to these types of levels of awareness, the higher the chance that the nation is going to grow as a collective in a really healthy way. And since the United States is such an impactful country, it could only have a positive ripple effect out into the world, yeah? Well, I mean, more than likely. I don't mean to speak in extremes, yeah? Okay, so yeah, the next return will be, at least as far as what I found when I was looking this up, it'll be 2022. In 2021, which is supposed to be a pivotal year by the account of some people, Pluto gets really close. It's like 26 degrees, so it gets very close to returning, but not quite. It doesn't quite happen until February 20th, 2022. That's when it hits its first return, but it's still direct at that time. And if you'll remember the natal chart for the U.S. birth chart, right, that was a retrograde Pluto. So the first retrograde Pluto that conjuncts with the natal chart is July 12th, 2022, which is just the one that I'm using as an example. That's the one I'm going to be focusing on. And yeah, let's see here. So that's right. I already mentioned that Pluto is a retrograde in the U.S. chart. So yeah, Pluto, again, just like in the natal chart, though a little bit closer this time, it's in a new phase from the south node of its own planet. Right? So I would ask, with this information, will we be wiser and or more mature as we begin this new evolutionary phase? I think so. I honestly think so. I mean, at least people in the meeting here, people who are focusing on self-inquiry, knowing themselves, spiritual growth, personal growth, you know, like really realigning with themselves, which seems to be becoming more and more popular. Right? I think that we are in a wiser place. It's really impossible unless I feel we're willfully attempting to destroy ourselves to evolve completely backwards, especially over like a 240 some odd year cycle, right? We have to have learned something in that time, and I feel that to be the case. And so, yeah, will we more willfully endeavor to soften and balance our Cancer, Capricorn, mother, father from within and in the world, thus becoming more aligned to a natural and connected yet highly individual way of being? because that's the important part here, is to be who we are, live from our core, have an ego self, but also be contributing to the collective as a whole. And again, I just want to say, probably just my opinion. I do believe that it does align with natural law, though, that this would be the case, to become whole beings, aligned beings with the core of ourself. And then naturally, we just in so doing, it seems to me that the implication of that would be that we find a way to seamlessly weave ourselves into the rhythms of the world, the rhythms of the earth, in a way that's working in harmony with the earth without losing ourselves in the process. Okay, so this one, I've got a few things I want to indicate in this particular slide. So I've got lots of highlights here, which I'll go through. The Saturn retrograde in this 2022 chart, the Pluto return chart, it rules Pluto, Saturn retrograde in Aquarius. It rules Pluto and the south node of Pluto. And so this is an interesting one, especially when we consider that it's about a semi-sextile from Pluto. It could be a bit of an awkward phase as far as creating new groups, new ideals, new humanitarian endeavors that we may be feeling called or impelled to work towards at this point in time. The moon in Capricorn also rules Pluto's north node, which is down toward the bottom of the chart, right? And Pluto's north node is conjunct the sun in Cancer, and it's in like a balsamic phase conjunction, right? So the nation's collective identity, being the sun, is almost ready to begin a new cycle around the same time that Pluto, the soul of the nation, reaches its return, which is an interesting thing to see. The soul reaching its return, a return or the end of a cycle, a culmination of experience, ready to begin anew. And then the sun is just about to birth itself into a new cycle as well, from the north node of the moon, that evolutionary imperative towards Cancerian ways of being, yeah? What does it mean to embody the archetype of Cancer as a nation going forward in a world becoming ever more disillusioned with the state of the nation? This is a question to ask perhaps in a balsamic phase conjunction. We're just about to go there, right? At this point in time. I don't mean today, I mean in 2022. The north node of the moon in Taurus is conjunct, and the north node of the moon in Taurus, I have this as an Aries chart, a 0 degrees Aries, so you'll notice it's in the bottom left here. So the north node of the moon in Taurus is conjunct a Taurus-Uranus, which is ruled by a Gemini Venus. There's so many ways we can interpret this. These are just some things that I wanted to bring up for you to contemplate. Could this mean radical acceptance of ourselves and other? Radical acceptance so that we can find peace from within and peace among the differences between ourselves? So that we can actually interact with each other in such a way where we're giving each other space, giving each other the autonomy and the room to breathe and just be, perhaps, yeah? This can also be indicating perhaps developing a curiosity towards those different from us in order to learn more. Gemini loves to label, right? Wants to categorize, wants to understand and index things. And so wanting to learn more about people, Venus, social, right? Very social planet, especially in Gemini. So there's this desire to want to interact with people, communicate with people, but to also have that space for ourselves so that we can breathe without anxiety, so that we feel like we belong here. We don't feel threatened, right? Yeah, this could be showing that we're discovering that our brothers and sisters may not just be blood, right? Maybe we could start seeing that we're all kin. I think that'd be nice. And I don't just mean on paper. I mean the way we treat each other, right? Gemini can be a bit superficial, though. However, the North Node is in a more down-to-earth sign like Taurus. So I feel we'll be being called to, radically find peace from within and without. The South Node of the Moon is in Scorpio, which is ruled by Capricorn Pluto. Interesting, yeah. So this could imply a collective memory of control dynamics, manipulation, shadow selves, and again, shadow governments and control structures in the individual and in the collective, where, you know, where's our memory of where maybe we were tyrannical or where we came from such structures? Where are our shadows within the self and within the collective? And the reason why I ask this is because when we're looking at the natal chart, and this would be more affecting, I would think, directly the people of the nation of the United States, but because the United States is so impactful, this could have residual ripple effects in the cognition of people outside of those imaginary borders. And so I bring this up because on some level, I mean, me as a Canadian who's immigrating to the States at current, I feel I'm impacted even before I started the immigration process, and I feel that it's valid to consider these kinds of things, like where's our memory of, during this time in 2022, like our memory is going to be focused in some way, form, or fashion on the things that I mentioned earlier, as well as emotional control, hidden things that are inside of us and in the outer world, skeletons in the closet, finding peace with that, though. Remember, we're looking at the North Node, so we're trying to find peace from within by perhaps relinquishing and working through our shadows. Having a South Node in Scorpio can also imply to a strong desire to evolve. Now, I didn't mention this earlier, but karma, asteroid karma, is conjunct the South Node. Now, asteroids, like this aren't as studied as some. But from what I can understand of karma, asteroid karma, it can talk about karmic cycles. And depending on where it's placed in the chart will lend us insight into what kind of karmic cycles or experiences it's implying. So being right next to the South Node, this can be potentially implying that we're ready. We know what it's like to live in the shadow. We know what it's like to take advantage of others, to manipulate, to control. And having that deep imprinted memory, perhaps that it's time to move toward a more down-to-earth way of being, a more honest and real way of being, as evidenced in the North Node of Taurus conjunct Uranus and Taurus. And so there was one other thing I wanted to mention here. Well, it says most importantly, so it must be important. The capability and the capacity to evolve through emotional mastery and connection to the lower self, i.e. the soul, that could be part of the memory in 2022 as well. Yeah? The collective memory is what I'm saying. And perhaps on an individual level as well. Using the moon's nodes to gain perspective regarding our own inner imperative to evolve. And looking at this from, again, the lens of being from within the collective and as individuals. Because Aries, Libra, as within, so without, right? Like, we're not an island. Let me see here. What slide am I on? Okay. Just want to make sure I have time. So moving forward now, here in the present day, we're back in December 13th, 2018, as evidenced by the chart here. We've got Pluto and Capricorn. The toxicity contained in the way this archetype is being played out or iterated right now in the collective is becoming more and more apparent to more and more people, I feel. This can be seen through the Capricorn archetype as corruption and nepotism, elitism in the government and business, massive wealth disparities, racism, otherism, genderism, etc., etc., etc. A distorted Capricorn energy can be quite sociopathic. Speaking as a Capricorn, a lot of Capricorns in my planet, in my chart, I just want to be honest with you. Sociopathy, sadism and cruelty. If we're vibrating really low Capricorn levels, those can be potentials that we could see. Yeah. Hard-heartedness, lack of emotion. The ends justify the means mentality on a soul level. That's what we're seeing with Pluto and Capricorn, perhaps, right? However, the spirit, like the spirit within and the spirit without, we can call it source, mind, God, whatever you call it, it's always calling for us to grow and become more. To return home, perhaps? Yeah, maybe. There's also the potential with a Capricorn Saturn in a balsamic phase to a Capricorn Pluto to come to terms with the past. in acknowledging the truth of all that has transpired in reality, forgiving the past in order to prepare to begin anew with a more solid and willful intention, in order to reaffirm the soul desire that of the Capricorn Pluto soul, the US, right? Since we're coming on the end of that cycle, like I was saying in 2022, you know, it being a balsamic phase, perhaps we're preparing for what's next. And disillusionment near the end of a cycle, dark nights of the soul, it seems to be typical in many alchemical processes, you know, just before the final product is revealed, we could say. So yeah, in reaching a healthy and realistic conclusion, or let me see, what did I say? In reaching healthy and realistic conclusions of all that has happened up until now, the implications of this for ourselves and our fellow man, as well as accepting the responsibility to reach our calling, i.e. self-mastery, alignment with our purpose, our core self, become closer to ensuring that we're properly manifesting the original intention asserted on July 4th, 1776. The north node of the moon in Cancer, balsamic to the north node of Pluto, also in Cancer. Yeah? So what could this mean? Potentially, it could mean an evolutionary imperative to develop our Cancerian side as individuals, as a hive mind. And this can play out in many ways and is dependent on our maturity level, our sagacity, our self-esteem, so many things, yeah? So here are just 2 examples of how we could go. We could harden our shells in healthy ways, developing strong emotional container from within so that our emotions aren't ruling us, you know? If we're getting triggered, triggering seems to be a big thing these days. Everyone's getting triggered by something, right? Hashtag triggered. It seems that, that emotions are high these days, easily tripped, you know? If we were to think of them like a trap or something, like they're easily sprung. And so developing a strong emotional container to hold those emotions could be a good way to go. Emotional maturity, right? Building family units, and that doesn't necessarily mean blood family. That could be soul family, community, these kinds of things. Developing a maternal instinct to feed and nourish our children and those in our charge. So when I say in our charge, I mean the people that we feel responsible for. Or we could, you know, and anything in between. I don't mean to be so black and white, but I only have so much space and so much time. So I also offered this alternative, hardening our shells in unhealthy ways. We could be doing that from now. We could do that by being emotionally immature and rigid, not wanting to wake up or transition, you know, keep ourselves safe and secure. We could continue being emotionally reactive. And some people may, mostly I would think just from pure ignorance of what's required, you know. We may see this happening now and in the future. I've seen it. Maybe you have. Codependence and clinging, you know. In Buddhism, they say that the key to enlightenment is neither to cling or be averse to anything, right? So the desire to cling to the familiar, the past, perhaps keeps us from enlightenment. Stockholm Syndrome. We definitely want to shed our Stockholm Syndrome as a nation, as a collective. Nationalism may not be that productive for us either. Supremacist groups, you know, building these kinds of things where we're placing ourselves above another or looking down on others. When I say supremacist group, I don't necessarily mean like white supremacists. Any kind of group where we feel like we're higher than others, or where we need to exclude from others or protect ourselves from others. From emotionally reactive places, not necessarily like sagacity or objective viewing or seeing the world. Probably not a great idea. Closed borders is another thing that we could do moving forward that may not necessarily be a healthy way to go. Like I was saying, remember the North Node does not automatically assume positive growth. Growth is not automatically healthy if the individual is not resonating with their true nature in mind, body, and actions. So if we're incongruent, we eventually will get there. We'll eventually get to the point, but it may take way longer as far as our evolution goes, yeah? All right, so we're down to the final slide here. So these are just some things I wanted to talk about too, because there are many ways that we can turn the tide and grow in a very healthy direction. It's not always going to be easy because growth is an uncomfortable process. I mean, if you even just observe a plant, and watch how it struggles and even shakes when we look at it on high-speed film, how a plant just shakes as it's trying to grow and reach toward the sun. It's a process that requires willful intent and action to follow it up, right? So know thyself. Probably a good place to start. And this is the thing. We don't have to do anything massively grandiose. We don't have to go out there and sacrifice our lives to turn the tide of the nation. We don't need to be violent. We don't need to turtle up and close down borders, you know. But knowing thyself is a big piece, because when you know yourself, you know the nature of this construct, reality, nature. And when you understand that, logic just falls into place, logos, the word of God. It becomes much more easy to connect to than when we're facing away from our nature, from knowing ourselves. So shadow work's going to be a thing, which is at the bottom there. And I would say, I put a caveat there, not for the faint of heart. Like, if you want to grow, you know, shadow work is pretty important. We want to see all of ourselves, the dark and the light. We need to see it and see that it's not as bad as the fear causes us to think it is, the repulsion causes us to think it is. But if you're not at a place where you can handle dark nights of the soul, disillusionment, these kinds of automatic processes as far as like willful alchemical transmutation goes of the inner self, then it may be best to try some other things first and then build yourself up to that. Knowing thyself through astrology can help. Willfully choosing to follow through in aligning yourself to your true self, even in willfully intending to do that, and then just taking it step by step. You know, depending on your evolutionary journey, some people are all ready to just go straight for it, right? I think in Jeffrey Wolf's Pluto book, Jeffrey Wolf Green's Pluto book even says, like, there's different, you know, willingnesses or levels as far as evolution goes with Pluto. Some people are ready to go all in, some people are resistant, and some people are half and half. And so going at pace is super important, but willfully choosing to align with yourself. You're literally telling your cells that you're ready to come back. Neural pathways start beginning to be built with consistent focus, right? So that actually moves into the next point. Please learn how to meditate and do it daily. Please, please. Very important. It's not always easy, especially in the beginning. You can feel a lot of resistance. I've experienced that myself when I was teaching meditation at school. Students had that issue, and I also hear it in passing. You know, just people say, I'd love to meditate, but just don't want to, or I find it hard. The more you do it, it's a muscle, right? The more you do it, you start developing clear seeing. You start being able to see the world objectively. And again, like I was saying in the previous slides, it takes us out of our emotional reactivity and brings us to a more centered place so we can see clearly and act from there. Emotions aren't a bad thing. It's just when emotions are are controlling the will, or influencing the will to the point where the will doesn't have a will of its own, then we're in trouble. And that's kind of how we got to where we are now in some ways as well. Moving your body in ways that are fun for you. A lot of this stuff might not seem sensical, like on the off, but this is how we release somatic traumas. This is how we become stronger, because again, as within, so without, so important. Strong inner world, strong physical vessel. This helps too. You are contributing even by doing that. And you don't necessarily have to, run on a stair climber for an hour and a half, 5 days a week. Find ways to move your body that are fun for you. You can find that out looking in your natal chart if you're having difficulty figuring that out. For instance, strong Pisces placements, depending on what planets and placements, that could mean that dancing, ecstatic dance, could be an Aquarius thing mixed with Pisces. There's so many different things we could be doing. Sports, and different types of sports, swimming, just move your body. Nourish yourself and nourish others that you are genuinely called to nourish. So giving to people, taking away, leaving that lack mentality, that a lot of us have developed just as a result of being in this kind of a traumatic cycle, of just being influenced or living in a nation that could be more generous. It was definitely not generous, fair, or safe. So there can be this sense of fear and lack and a need to protect ourselves and kind of not be open, gregarious, and generous. But remember, North Node in Leo in the original natal chart of the United States. So generosity is actually an evolutionary direction that the nation originally could have been intending to go towards. So building a desire to share and nourish is a great way to go. And also, too, I mentioned the Cancer North Node as of today at current, and the current North Node of the Moon is in Cancer, and the North Node of Pluto also in Cancer. So, sharing and caring and inclusion, I think, comes from the EA paradigm. It makes sense for this Cancer North Node. Let's see here. Thanks, Wanda. Care about the long term, right? Thinking more than in 4-year election cycles. We want to think long term, like the indigenous peoples of this nation, thinking 7 generations ahead, so that we can think about what we're actually doing, the implications of our actions, the fallout of our actions, what we're sowing, what we'll be reaping in 7 generations, thinking far ahead, long term. Think about your own personal legacy. What do you want to leave behind? What do you want to contribute? What would you like future generations to benefit from for you having been here? And it's not like you have to put tons of pressure on yourself. This is all about being you. And if you're being yourself, I would hope it wouldn't be too stressful of an experience. I would hope that you would be more joyful and happy. So the benefits of all of this, it's a win-win-win scenario, I would think. Resolve to be more growth-oriented. Adulting. What is adulting? It's not getting older. It's not chronologically aging. It's developing self-mastery. And even just developing the allowance to really let yourself be who you are and not let Plutonic, Capricornic, distorted type of paradigms control that or force you to conform to that. And again, like I said, shadow work, which I already talked about earlier. So with a few minutes left, that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thanks so much for being here. If we do have time, I would like to leave it open for comments and questions if there are any.
I have a comment and a question.
Sure.
I just wanted to say thank you. I really loved the content and how you talked about the United States. And I saw a little clip there. It said 3D was in quotes and it said the real world. And I'm curious, what would you put on the 5D in the air quotes?
Oh, 5D, yeah. So I was talking about, I was focusing more on the 3D realm just because there's so much Capricorn stuff going on, but 5D is obviously important too. I would consider that to be synonymous with the realms of imagination. So some people say they're astral realms, but it's the realm of conception on the imaginary plane. It's our ideas, it's our dreams in a sense. These things, as they're developing up in 5D, they're not quite down here crystallized and solidified yet. And so I'm wondering, what was your question exactly? I just want to make sure I'm clearly answering.
Well, you had summed up 3D and just given like an air quote and it said the real world. And I'm curious, sum up 5D to be like, I guess you would said imagination or vision?
Yeah, exactly as you're saying, imagination and vision. So when I say the real world in quotes, it's because there's so many worlds other than just the physical plane, but we could call it the real world because we're physically incarnate here in the corporeal realm. So I guess that would be where I was going with that, if that makes sense.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Does anyone else have a question or a comment?
I have more questions if nobody else does.
Sure. Yeah, okay. Go for it.
I guess I really liked, first of all, the nodes of Pluto. And at one point you said it was ruled by Saturn?
Mm-hmm. The south node of Pluto in Capricorn. Yeah, it's ruled by Saturn.
And that's just because in the natal U.S. chart, the south node is in Aquarius. Is that right?
Well, in the natal chart, I believe it was actually a Saturn in Libra. I'm just going to go back real quick to that one. I'm pretty sure it's Saturn in Libra. And then in the 2022 chart, it was a Saturn in Aquarius. Yeah, it's Saturn in Libra in the original chart.
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't really have a question, but I just really look forward to watching this all again and really taking that all in one more time.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I would recommend it for sure. There was a lot that was covered. So if you have that interest, by all means, please do. Definitely.
I had a thought as you were doing your presentation, and just absolutely fabulous.
Oh, thanks, Wanda.
I'm thinking the thought that came to mind as far as the Cancer archetype. I'm wondering, does that, to me, that seems to point towards the indigenous peoples of the land. So maybe the move away from the Capricorn South Node, Capricorn being, and it's definitely been our past of arrive on another nation's land, arrive and subjugate, is to move away from that and embrace the individuality, the Leo, North Node, and the wisdom of the indigenous peoples, because they've been, on that land. They know how it works and things like that. So
Yeah.
it was just a thought that kind of popped in my mind as you were going through your presentation.
Well, I love that because another thing about at least the indigenous people that I interact with, friends and family and people in my community here in Nova Scotia and Canada, it seems to me there's just an inherent knowledge too of family and caring for each other. So that also makes sense with the Cancer archetype as well. It's very natural to them to share and care for each other. That wasn't quite as, we could say, cutthroat or capitalistic, distorted Capricorn, toxic, definitely more, I would say, closer to that matrilineal way of being that we could see evidenced in Cancer. Just to affirm what you're saying, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, Wanda.
I could even say further, like how Native Americans don't even consider ownership of land. Like, it's just beyond their conception. And that would be like the distortion of Capricorn. And then the Cancer would be more, they care for the land. They have specific words where they are planting seeds for generations to come intentionally.
Yeah, like there's a further reaching awareness. I think things like election cycles have really caused us to be so short-sighted when it comes to, the cause and effect of our actions, who we're electing, what kind of laws are being brought into place, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, long-term thinking. And Cancer is also synonymous with memory, right? Cancer Mercury, for example, which the chart here has, photographic memory. Can remember very, very, especially if it's an emotionally heightened experience, a Capricorn Mercury can remember forever. Same with a Capricorn Sun or a Venus, very nostalgic. So if we were to think of it that way, we could see, those deep roots, if with indigenous people, especially being so connected to the earth, it just stands to reason that with such deep roots in connection to the earth and the past and family, that it would be automatic to think in long term for the future, for future generations, which they do, 7 generations ahead. Yeah, which is just makes sense. It's practical, which would be a healthy way to look at Capricorn too, right? Practical thinking. We want to think about building lasting structures with staying power, not to get power, but for something that is lasting for generations to come. Legacies are very synonymous with Capricorn energy too, just to look at the polar opposite of the Cancer energy. If we were to put those two together and see them as a whole, as a one, maybe we could see things like that, as what I just mentioned and what Wanda's touched on, and you as well, Della.
Yeah, I actually have another thought, because this is actually like really kind of what I've been researching for a long time. in exploring through astrology, and I also got intuitive downloads to it, so I didn't so much see it as in charts until you really put it in front of me. But I'm curious what you think about, in the United States, it's almost as if there's been two histories since its beginning, depending on which, you know, class or race or whichever you're in or not. And so now we're dealing with the time when we're dealing with things collectively, but it's almost as if we've been on two separate trajectories historically, like if we look back. So I kind of have seen that as like the DNA spiral. Like when you zoom in on history, like let's say it's a rope or a timeline, and as you zoom in, it's actually like these two spiraling histories together. So I'm curious what you think of the statement, like, one, how we're doing things, our collective traumas are arising, and it's happening collectively, but that it's very much different what each of us needs to be doing versus like self-care versus like speaking out. Or would you say there's just one frequency of action?
Well, I think there's, I know we only have a minute, Wanda. I'm sorry. Is it okay if I answer that very quickly, under 20 seconds?
Yes, just address one part of the question because we do need to wrap it up.
Okay, so I would just say that, like, as far as your question goes, Della, I think that many timelines are transpiring at once based on our own individual experiences. But what you're saying also brings up really great points. I would love to explore this further, but we are at the end. So I would just say that as far as our own what we're impelled to do as far as growth goes will be largely dependent on ourselves individually. We'll know what to do if we're listening to our core self.
Okay, could you stop the share? And of course, that brings us to the end of your meeting. And as I said before, it was absolutely fabulous. So would you all please thank Sarah DeHaven?
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It was very interesting.
You're welcome,
Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yes.